Thanks for having me here. I'm Daniel. I'm a software developer from the Vidlash group. We specialize in making React Native applications. We also try to do some open source when we are not doing stuff for our clients. So we have like a library for in-app notifications, which is called React Native Notificated. We also have an emoji picker, React Native emoji picker. You can check that out. Yeah, so I guess that was the introduction, and the topic that I'm going to talk about today is file-based navigation for Expo and React Native applications with a library called Expo-Router, a library that has just been released recently. I learned about it by seeing a tweet from Evan, and basically as soon as I saw it, I was like really interested in it. Basically, I wanted to check it out, how it works, what's the API. So I guess today is also like a great chance to do it, to take a look at this library together. So we're going to take a look at its API, and also at the end we're going to try to build a really simple application, just for the sake of testing out the API. So you probably already know we have different approaches in which we can handle navigation. If you come from React Native world, you probably heard about React Navigation, or maybe about React Native Navigation by Wix. If you're doing mobile applications, you probably know React Router DOM, or maybe you had a chance to work with Next.js. So it's also like a different approach in which you can handle navigation. So let's now try to answer a question. What's the navigation with Expo-Router like? I mentioned React Navigation and Next.js intentionally before, because Expo-Router is built on top of React Navigation. And apart from that, it also brings some routing concepts from web to mobile. It's also native. You get all the cool features like gestures, transitions. It's deep linkable. And by that, I mean that some stuff the library can do automatically. Like you don't have to manually assign certain screens to paths. So if you want to set up deep linking, you only have to take care of your scheme, but the screens will be automatically assigned a certain path. It's a cross-platform solution, so basically, like you target with one setup, one code, you target web and mobile, iOS, Android at once. And all these characteristics, they all are a part of like goals of the new routing system. You can read more about it in the article that Evan wrote. Here's a QR code. If you want, you can scan it and see the article. It's really interesting. You can read more about the motivation behind the library, the problems, the plans for the future, etc. So let's now take a look at the API. If you want to take a look at it and have a bit of fun with the library yourself, you can just initialize a new Expo application by just running this command. There's a template out there which you can use. You can also install the library into your existing application, but keep in mind that it's a bit more to it than just installing a package. There's some further setup required for it. But you can read all about it in the documentation. It's really nicely explained there. So yeah, let's now talk about how you're actually going to handle navigation with Expo-Router. So by looking at this code snippet, you probably already have an idea how it works, more or less. We will try to go through it line by line. So maybe let's start with the folder. As you can see, all our screens are placed inside an app folder. So this is basically like a root place for your application. And the app folder is like, it's by design, it's, you have to use it in this way. You can read more about it in the documentation also. There's like reasoning behind it. Yeah, and simply like the entry point to your application is index file. And whenever you add a new file in the app directory, you basically add a new screen, and by default, each screen has a path assigned to it. As you can probably see, you can also nest the screens inside some folders. You can do it for a few reasons. One of them might be that, for example, you want to prepend a path to the screen with some additional value. You can also group the screens because maybe you want to add some kind of layout for the screens, or maybe you want to set up some kind of nested navigation for the screens. All this you can achieve by nesting the screens in a folder. Before we go further, there's also one more thing to talk about it while we are at this slide. The last line represents, the file called ID, and the name is wrapped with curly square braces. This is basically a dynamic root, meaning a screen that you're going to add and declare inside this file is going to have a part of the link, which is a dynamic part. The screen is going to have it available in root params. So given this example, the 999 is like a dynamic part. It can be, for example, an ID. Yeah. So a moment before, I mentioned that you can group folders, files inside folders. You can also group them inside fragments. Fragments are basically the concept is pretty similar, with this exception that when you put something inside a fragment, the path is not going to be prepended with the name of the folder. All you have to do is just to wrap the name of the folder in parentheses. Yeah, and basically you can, to add a new screen, you add a new file, you add React component. You just have to keep in mind that the component, it has to be default exported. You can't use named exports, otherwise, if you use named exports, the Expo-Router will not perceive component as a screen. Obviously, probably every application there is out there redirects user to some places. You can also do it easily with Expo-Router. You can do it in a more imperative way or in a more declarative way. Yeah, since it's built on top of React Navigation, you have access to navigation props. You can use navigation hook just as well. Here's like another possible way in which you can redirect the user somewhere by just simply using the redirect component, or again by using the useLink hook. Now let's talk a bit about layout components. Layout is like this concept of something that can basically wrap a part of screens. So by that I mean the layout, like the goal of the layout component is to be a wrapper around all of the screens that are declared in a sibling files. So if you use your imagination for a while now and think like, let's say we have a folder called main, and in this folder we have two files, posts.js and post details.js, which would be like two separate screens. if we add a layout component here, I mean in a new file called _layout.js, for example, then basically by doing so, we are declaring a layout component, and this layout component is going to wrap all of the screens in that folder. So basically, you could use it if you want to add some kind of navbar to a given set of screens. You can also use layout components to declare and instantiate a new, for example, stack navigators or bottom tabs navigators. Yeah. Maybe let's go back for a while. You can also like set up the stack navigators, for example. It works simply like basically the same way. Like if you used React navigation, you could just put some props and set up the stack navigator. The same you can do with Expo-Router. You can also like override settings of certain screens, like only in a single screen inside a stack navigator, for example. All you have to do is to import the stack component from Expo-Router and just inject it somewhere in your screen. And yeah, you can also easily manage and influence the default behavior of splash screen with Expo-Router. You can, for example, prolong its display if you want to do some preloads or other async stuff. There are a few more elements in the Expo-Router library, but we don't have like much time to go through all of them. You can like always check out the documentation. It's really like nicely done. Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we will try to build a simple application. And before we do so, let's maybe start with talking a bit what we will try to do. So we're going to build an app which has 3 screens. Like the main part of the application would be a friends list, and whenever you tap on a friend, you open friends details screen. And basically, we also want to have some kind of authorization system, like the app is going to check whether the user is authorized or not. If he or she is not authorized, we are going to show the registration flow. Otherwise, we're going to show the main part of the application. So for the sake of this this talk, I prepared a simple project starter. Let's run the bundler and see if everything works correctly. It seems like it does. Web should also work. Yeah, so let's go through each and every one of the files we have in our starter project. We have a text component, which is basically like some larger text. We also have a hook, use auth hook. Let's assume that this is our authorization system. We also have like a main screen of our application, which is like a list of our friends. And we also have our, let's say, registration flow, which is basically this simple text. We're missing one screen, the one with dynamic route, the one in which we want to display like details of a friend. So let's create a new file. We want the screen, this file, to be a dynamic route. So let's wrap the name of the file in square braces, and let's maybe copy the content from our registration screen. We have access to our props, navigation props, so we can just render the param that we are going to pass with a deep link, for example. And now we can maybe check if everything works as intended. I told you that the screens are deep linkable by default, like we have paths assigned to it automatically. So as you might guess, our main screen is accessible at our root path, the index file. The registration workflow is accessible at /register path. And our friend details screen is going to be accessible at / and the dynamic value. So let's see if it works. Yeah, we can see that the registration screen opened, and when we try to navigate to, for example, page about Ross, we also see a different screen. Let's also test it on mobile. Hopefully it will work. Yeah, it worked. Let's also try with the dynamic route. Seems to work as well. Next, let's add a stack navigator to our main part of the app, because we want to have this default header. We also want to have gestures, etc. So let's do it now. We can use a fragment to group two of these screens together and apply a layout to them. So let's do it. Let's call our fragment main. Let's also do the same with our friends list component. Let's also move it to main fragment. We also need to update the paths. And let's see if everything works. As you can see, the app still works. So let's now add a stack component, a stack navigator. So let's use the aforementioned layout in order to do it. So let's add a new file called layout_layout. So by the way, if you want to add a layout component, the file name it has to be named _layout. Otherwise, it won't work. We can add our stack navigator in this simple way. Let's see. Okay, we don't have the redirection in place, so let's quickly add it. If you remember, we can use the useLink hook if you want to redirect a user somewhere. So let's point the user to a proper friend details screen. Let's see if it works. It works. Before we go further with the authorization flow, let's also change one more thing. We don't want to have this title here, which is derived from the file name. We can simply override it in our layout component. So instead of just exporting the imported stack, let's just create our own component, which is going to render the stack, and let's just override the friends list app. Let's just override the title. And it works. The title changed. It's different. Obviously, it's just like React navigation. You can pass down some other config, like you can configure further the look of the header. You can change the transition animation, the direction of the gestures, etc. Yeah, basically, let's also try to, because I told you that you can also change the setting of a single screen. Let's also try to do it by importing stack component once again. And now let's just inject it into our screen, and in this way we can also change the screen. This one, as we can see, we have in the title of in the header we have a name of a friend. Yeah. So the last thing we want to build is to build like an authorization system, and to do it, we can just use the layout component one more time. Let's do it. Let's create a new layout file, this time in our app folder. Just like that. And now we're going to do something different. Basically, layout can also conditionally redirect you away from certain navigators that you add. You can do it by just rendering the layout component, just like that. And in order to conditionally render one navigator or the other, you just have to do something like that. You also have to remember about rendering the children. If you don't render a children component, the layout won't show you the content of the files of the screens that the component is wrapping. Yeah, and now let's just tell the Expo-Router library which navigators we want to like display. So we want to either show the main content of our application, which is hidden behind the main fragment, or show the authorization flow, which is basically a registration screen. And to show one or the other, redirect to one or the other, we can use redirect prop. And redirect prop simply tells the library when the library should redirect a user away from this screen, from this part. So let's try to use it along with our use auth hook. Our hook returns a user. So we want to redirect away from our main screen whenever we don't have any user data, and we want to redirect away from registration whenever we, sorry, I misspelled, whenever we don't have a user. So let me just open the use authorization hook side by side so you could see it, and let's restart everything. So let's try to test it first on web. Right now we don't have a user, so we don't want to show something is not working. Yeah. So we don't have any user data at this moment. So whenever we try to reach a part of the application which is not meant to be seen by unauthorized users, the Expo library will just show us our registration flow. Let's see if the same goes for example, for the Phoebe page. Yeah, we see the registration flow just as well. And if we, let's say we don't have some user data now, then we can access our main feature, so to say. And if we try to access register workflow, it redirects us away just as well. Let's test it on mobile. So we now are authorized. So if we try to open our registration workflow, we should be presented with a main screen instead, just like that. Let's now get rid of the user data. And let's test it again. This time by trying to access a friends detail page. Yeah, and we see the registration flow. So yeah, basically that was it. Thanks for being here with me. And also, like, I would just like to give some kudos to Expo team. It seems like a good job. Yeah, and as I said before, here's a QR code to an article by Evan Bacon. You can take a look at it and read more about it. There are some links to the documentation and to the GitHub discussion page, so you can take a look there. Thanks.